It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up? Here's your bitch boy, Millsy. Back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the Commander in front of us on my quest to brew the magic world. As always, that deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, as well as I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider becoming a member of the channel for all videos early and some other perks, and check out the links in the description for me below. Today, with most of our main Duskmourn content out of the way, I wanted to take individual, support or cards from Duskmourn and take a look at the decks that could use them. And the new card that got me looking at a couple things was the new Tyvar, right? An elf that can buff your board of elves. And I was trying to think of what decks, of course, want to play something like Tyvar. And the elf deck that came to mind first for me, and there's a couple more coming on the channel over the coming weeks, but the first one I thought of was Voja, Jaws of the Conclave, a Naya 5/5 wolf with Vigilance, Trample, and Ward 3 that says whenever Voja attacks, we put X +1/+1 counters on each creature we control, where X is the number of elves we control. We draw a card for each wolf we control. This is a really fun deck because elves are very good at what they do. Going wide, tapping for mana, creating value. And what Voja basically does is takes your board of elves and dumps +1/+1 counters on them and makes them even harder to deal with. We have all the great trample enablers in green. We've got some haste enablers in reds. There's a lot of ways we can take advantage of the elves in these particular colors. And then, right, over the course of, even Bloomburrow and sets before it, we got lots of counter support as well. So we've got all this new support since Voja originally came out in Mirza Karlov Manor. And I think we can take advantage of some of it here in this deck. So we'll talk about the elves, we'll talk about some of the wolves in the deck. We can take advantage of drawing some cards. We'll talk about haste, counters matter, and then a little combo, combat combo to end the game. But I think the elves are our bread and our butter. Right? We want most of them as possible so we can get the most counters on all of our creatures. And there's a lot of ways we can accomplish this. We have things like Arwen, which is going to put counters on every elf that comes in. We equal to its toughness. So as Arwen gets bigger, the elves that have come in are going to get bigger and bigger. Beast Whisperer, that classic elf draw engine, allowing us to draw every time we cast a creature spell. Drew the Anima is a 2-mana elf instead of a 1-mana one that taps for one color, tapping for all 3 of our colors, which is great, especially on those odd hands where you need a 2-mana an elf to fix that third color to get Voja out. And things like that. Elvish Archdruid, giving all of their elves +1/+1 and taps for a green for each elf you control. It's a great ability when we start getting up into the top end of our curve and making a ton of mana for a bunch of fun spells. Elvish Harbinger is an elf I've always liked. When it comes in, you can search your library for any elf you want, reveal it, and put it on top. This could be really beneficial for a couple reasons. The 2 main reasons, right, are our finishing elves, right? Things like Azuri, which we'll catch on the next slide, and then Tyvar on the slide after it. And Elvish War Master, whenever one more elves come in under our control, we make another 1/1 elf, and that only goes off once per turn. That's really nice because now we're getting more elves on board. Remember, Void doesn't care about attacking elves, Void cares about just elves in general, meaning the more we have, the better. Warmaster does allow us for 7 mana to get +2/+2 in Death Touch, and remember that Death Touch does pair really well with Trample, so that's always an option if we can get that set up. Azuri is one of our main finishers, a 3-mana, a 2/2 elf that for 2 and 3 green can give all elves +3/+3 and Trample until end of turn. So if we already have them particularly large, here's another little buff and Trample to get them through that last amount to hit for big damage. Imperi is perfect, giving all elves +1/+1 and can make another elf every turn. Kind of what we want it to do, right? Come down and make us an elf every turn that we can tap it to get to go wider and wider on the elves. Priest of Titania, they're very similar effect, giving us a green for each elf on the battlefield. Rocco might look odd to some people, but it's in here because it is an elf, so it doesn't matter. But I like it because it's kind of a mini Court of Calling of sorts, right? Whenever it comes in, if you cast it, we could search our library for a creature card with mana value X or less and put it on the battlefield. So dump a bunch of mana into Rocco, and we can just go get the creature that we want and get it on the battlefield ready to go. And there's a lot of options right for that. Tyvar the Pummeler, that new one, 5 mana, giving all of our creatures +X/+X, where X is the greatest power among creatures we control, is a great ability. This is exactly what you'd pay for something like Overwhelming Stampede. Now, Tyvar doesn't give you Trample like that spell does, but it's important because if we have Trample through other means, this is still a lot of damage. This is also just a lot of damage if we can do it more than once. Think about it. If we have 10 mana from 1 or 2 elves, we can do this twice, right? Giving our board a massive buff and getting it for damage. Wood Elves searching for a forest when it comes in is great because we have a lot of dual land type lands that we can accomplish for that. A pair of spells from the Lord of the Rings commander decks in Galadrim Ambush and Windsweep Slice. The ambush says that we create X one green elf warrior creature tokens where X is the number of attacking creatures. So there's two ways you can enable that. You can either use it defensively, right, and make a bunch of elves for everything that's attacking you, or we can use this offensively and actually respond to Voja's trigger to make a bunch of elves and pump up that amount, and then it prevent all non-combat damage that we dealt this turn, all combat damage that we dealt this by non-elf creatures. Only elves deal damage. Again, that can just protect our board if someone tries to block out, right, or we need to block effectively. And then Windswift Slice is fun, especially when a Voja starts getting very big. Target creature you control deals damage to its power equal to another creature, and we create 1/1 elves for each excess damage dealt this way. It could be a lot, right? And just swarm our board with elves as we get into combat. And then Patchwork Banner. I feel like every tribal deck wants a Patchwork Banner. +1/+1 of other creatures of the chosen type and a mana of any color is great. And we don't even care that we're not going to call wolves. I think we're always going to call elves, and it's really going to take advantage of that. And I think the reason why we're always going to call elves is because we don't actually play a ton of true wolves in the deck. In fact, most of the best wolves that we have in the deck are changelings, meaning they're elves as well, and they're going to take advantage of all the other elf effects. Bloodline Pretender, in fact, we're going to have it and call elf, so that every other elf that comes in puts a counter on it, but it's also a wolf, meaning we're going to draw for it. Same thing with a regular cohort over there. Not only comes in as itself, but makes a token that comes in with it as changeling as well. So that's two, right? Elves and wolves for the purposes of Voja's ability. Hollowhenge Overlords are pretty fun at the beginning of our upkeep. For each creature we control that's a wolf or werewolf, we make a wolf. So it just doubles the amount of wolves on our turn, meaning more card draw for Voja. And believe me, it won't take much card draw on this deck to get it going at its boiling point. Mirror Entity, again, changeling, so it's both. Same thing with Tarian Mauler, so it's both. So as many of these key creatures that we can have that are both elves and wolves are going to help us a ton. But then we have a couple printings of Tolsimir, right, who is an elf that makes Voja, right, the other versions of Voja that are tokens. So we're getting an elf and a wolf, right, out of one card. Friend of Wolves makes Voja Friend to Elves, a legendary 3/3 green and white wolf creature token. And then whenever a wolf comes in, we gain 3 life, and it can fight up to one creature we don't control. So that's a pretty nice ability. But again, wolf plus elf on one spell there. Same thing with Tolsimir Midnight's Light from Mirza Karlov Manor, making Voja Fenstalker, a 5/5 white wolf creature token with trample. And whenever a wolf we control attacks, if Tolsimir attack this combat, target creature and opponent control blocks that wolf this combat if able. This is kind of fun because for every wolf that's attacking, this is going to trigger as long as Tolsimir attacked as well, forcing them to block, right, if we want to take out particular creatures or things like that. Universal Automaton, just a cheap 1-mana changeling that's going to count for both. And then Howling Moon, whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, we make a wolf. And beginning a combat on our turn, we get a little buff to all wolves. So not as many wolves, right? But the point is that they're here, they're prevalent, and really we're caring more about the card draw on them than we are otherwise. But the nice part about all those changelings are they're going to count for both, so counter and right and card for all of them. As far as haste goes, we want to play a couple of them in here, mainly because we want to be able to, 1, tap all our elves for mana the turns they come down if necessary, but 2, I think we want to get attacking as soon as we can, and we don't really want to have to wait too long between getting creatures down and attacking, especially once we get the board state wide enough. We're going to be ripe for dealing with board wipes. We have things like Invigorating Hot Spring. It comes in with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. Modified creatures we control have haste. So any creatures that have equipment, auras, or counters on them are modified. And this is great if we have any other way to bring a creature in with haste, aka the card next to it, and other ways. And also, by putting a counter on it with Hot Spring, it says we can remove a counter from Hot Spring to put a counter on a creature we control at sorcery speed. So that's a way to give a creature haste 4 times, right, with the Hot Spring. Rhythm of the Wild, though, is great because it stops any of our creature spells from being countered. It says all non-token creatures have riots. They enter with their choice of +1/+1 counter or haste. This is kind of nice if we have the Hot Spring out, because now we can get both, right? We can just have it come in with a counter from the Rhythm, and the Hot Springs will give it haste. This is also nice if you have any other way to put a counter on a creature when it comes in. Again, it will get haste from that Hot Spring, and same thing, Rhythm could always choose haste, right, instead of the counter, and then you're still getting, even if they exist separately, you're still getting value. And then Rising of the Day is giving all creatures haste, and then our legendary creatures get a little bit of a buff. But as far as counters matter goes, there's a lot of ways we can take advantage of it. You have things like Devoted Druid and Gyre Sage that can tap for a ton of mana. Gyre Sage has evolves whenever a creature with a bigger power toughness comes in it gets a counter, but it taps for green for each counter on it, right? So as Voja puts counters on it, it's getting more and more mana to be able to tap for. Devoted Druid's the really fun one, right? Because it taps for a green mana. Its ability says you can put a -1/-1 counter on it to untap it. The way that works is a +1/+1 and a -1/-1 counter on a creature will just cancel out and disappear, meaning that if Devoted Druid has its 9 +1/+1 counters on it, we can untap it 9 times, meaning more mana. So Devoted Druid is really great to get that mana that way. And then Brevillewood Paragon just makes a ton of sense. So each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has trample, and that's going to happen a lot, right? That's the whole goal of the deck with Voja is to get counters on. So this is an elf for 2 mana that's going to give a whole board trample, and that's really important. Rishkar Pima Renegade turns every creature with a counter on it into a mana dork, tapping for greens. That could be really helpful as well. Rishkar can also put counters on creatures when they come in, when it comes in, so that's important for certain effects. Shalaya Halar is one of our big damage dealers in the deck. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature we control, Shalaya and Halar deal that much damage to target opponent. Let's say we have 6 elves on boards, right? And Voja attacks, putting 6 counters on all 6 of them. Shalaya and Halar is now dealing 36 damage, right, to opponents of our choice, right, in any combination we want. And that presents a risk for our opponents on letting us do this too many times with an out. Damning Verdict destroys all creatures with no counters on them, a way to potentially have a one-sided board wipe to stop our opponents. OB1 is another version of Shalaya and Halar that we have access to, but instead of to a target opponent, it deals at target opponent, creature opponent controls, or planeswalker opponent controls. So it does give the option to hit creatures as well. But I think OB1 and Shalaya and Halar are key things we want to see every game if possible, just to really start kind of chunking out our opponent's health totals and having them start to worry. Innkeeper's Talent, a good way to protect our board by leveling up to level 2 and getting ward 1 on all of our creatures. But if we can get up to level 3, now we're doubling all the counters that are being put on things. Again, making for Shalaya and Halar and all we want to deal more damage. But I think one of my favorite enchantments for this deck is on Civil Unrest. So it says non-token creatures you control have Riot. So same thing as Rhythm of the Wild, right? Counter or haste. But it says if a creature you control with a counter on it would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. This is equally as dangerous, right? Because now you run the risk of your opponents. If your opponents don't block a 4/4, now they're taking 8, right? Now they have a problem. They kind of have to block. They have to chump block, otherwise they're taking damage. And now, with Trample, we have a chance to deal even more damage, to our opponents. So I think on Civil Unrest is where the deck starts to really get threatening, because our opponents have to figure out what the heck they're going to do to stop the train. I love a good Aggravated Assault combo, and I think this is the perfect deck for it. Aggravated Assault says for 3 mana and 2 red, we can untap all creatures we control, and if it's a main phase, there's an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase, and we can only do that at a sorcery speed. So there's a lot of ways that we can accomplish Aggravated Assault as a combo. If we have creatures that can reliably, at current turn, can tap for 3 and 2 red, we can do this without the use of any other card. But there's a lot of great ways to do this with other cards. We have things like Nature as well, that as soon as one or more creatures deal damage to a player, we get to tap all lands that players control and untap all of our lands. That means that when we go to our next main phase after that combat, we'll have the 5 mana immediately, right, with all of our regular lands, and immediately be able to use the Ag Assault. Or we have things like Druid Repository. It says whenever a creature we control attacks, we put a charge counter on it. We can remove charge counters on it to make a mana of any color. We can just store up counters on Druid's Repository and use them when needed. It's a nice enchantment for that. But I think there will be lots of scenarios where, because not all of our elves just tap for green mana, I think we're going to be able to fulfill Aggravated Assault a lot. And when you're taking infinite combats, you don't need very many creatures to attack, especially once Voja just starts stacking those counters up for that game to end very, very quickly. But I say this on the show and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. Although I've taken a shot at Voja before and we're updating it here, I still feel like there's a lot we can learn in testing, and that's that, are these things that we're setting up enough to get us through in the mid-game? Do we need something like, we do, I believe, have Overwhelming Stampede in the list, but do we need more effects like that? Something like a Chroma's Will to just continue to get us through for those combats. I thought Legion Loyalty might be fun, giving all of our creatures Myriad, basically meaning that the amount of elves we have could triple on a combat, allowing for a lot of tokens to get put down at once. It's a large mana investment for Legion Loyalty, but I feel like it could end a game even quicker if we get into this mid-range state where we have that mana to spend. And then Mayel's Aria could just be interesting. At beginning or upkeep, you put a counter on each creature you control. If you control a creature with power 5 or greater, then you gain 10 life if you control a creature with power 10 or greater, and then we win if we control a creature with 20 or greater. I kind of view this as like a, kind of like a Simic Ascendancy type effect where you can win if you've, put enough counters. I don't know if I'm all in on Mayel's Aria, but it's an option, right, to potentially have an alternate win con for the deck instead of just slamming counters on creatures. But I think there's a lot could be learned for consistency, and I think that's the goal. Could we get the mana? Can we get the staying power online? Can we get the damage online to win the game? But let's get into playtest number 1, keeping a 4-lander, so lots of mana with the Rising of the Day, Drew the Anima, and Path. So we should be able to get Voja in with haste, right, the turn it comes in because of that Rising of the Day. Turn 1, I think we're going to have... Right, we're going to have an awkward thing with this Rootbound Crag right at the moment because we don't have a forest, so we'll get it in tapped. Turn 2, we'll play that Fortified Village showing that Plains, and we'll get Drew to the Anima down. Turn 3 here, play the Plains, and I think I'd kind of rather get that Rising of the Day down. Get it down so that next turn we can play, Exotic Orchard, get Voja down, and start basically dealing damage here on turn 4. So that's what get the Exotic Orchard down, get Voja down, move to combat, and out. Now the Anima was tapped. But basically on attack, we would get 1 counter on each of them and draw because, of course, Voja is a wolf. And now we have a 7/6 Voja dealing damage to somebody. It has Vigilance, so it's going to stay untapped if need be. On turn 5, we'll play that Reliquary Tower just so in case we start drawing too much, we have that. I have 2 red, so I could all be 1. But I think it also make sense to set up a little bit. Maybe go for this Garruk's Uprising to draw, see if we can get into another elf. And we do. We see Grand Warlord Rada, a way to add a bunch of mana, and we don't lose it until the end of turn. But we get to add a combination of red or green for each of the creatures we have that attack. So this is a way to get some damage, right, or get some mana after combat, right, to play some things. But we had to commit 3 into Garruk's Uprising needed down, so I don't think here main 1 we can get Rada down. I'm trying to think what makes the most sense. I got 3 mana by my count, unless I got 3 mana by my count. So I can either Farseek, but I want to play Llanowar, I think, no matter what. So we have another elf for that ability. Now if I do that, I'm still only at 3 mana. But at least Llanowar comes in and is able to attack or tap for mana if we wanted to. I think we can just go ahead and Farseek. Go ahead and just get something and bring it in. I kind of want to dual land if we can, right? The whole point of going through your deck is getting something when you can. I think I want something like Cinderglade. Just get another red land down. It's going to come in tapped no matter what, which is A-okay. Move to combat, everybody's going to get 2 counters because we control 2 elves. Draw with the draw for turn, air draw for the wolf, and then we didn't tap Llanowar, so Llanowar could attack. Could have attacked if we wanted it to. But I think it's okay if not. Voja is going to deal some damage. Druid, I think we already tapped for the purposes of that turn. I think next turn, basically, we just set up Rada netting us a ton of mana. I like the idea of all we won here. It's going to be a risk, right, to our opponents dealing some damage around. We'll get the forest in, or does it make more sense to Mosswort? Might make more sense to Mosswort here because we're going to be pretty much guaranteed to fulfill it. So we get to hide away the top 5. 4, eek. I'll bin that Annie. Bummer. So the top 4, we'll just grab that Tarian Mauler. Well, Wirewood Lodge isn't bad. We'll get the Tarian Mauler because it counts for both. So next turn we can potentially cast that Tarian Mauler off of the Mosswort Bridge. I could play Rhythm of the Wild and Grand Lord Rada, and I'm kind of thinking of that because I can have the Rada come in with the counter, and then it'll draw me a card off Garruk's Uprising. And it has haste because of the Rising of the Day, so I would go in, right? Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Mossrock Bridge there, 1, 2, 3 for the Rhythm of the Wild, 1, 2, 3. I'd say I tap the Druid for that. So I can attack with these 3, right? Net the 3. I guess we can net the 3 mana there, but we're going to get 3 counters. Draw 1 card for one of my elves. And again, now big damage going through to our opponents. Hopefully, we've added what I think makes the most sense. I guess green mana. But I guess it wouldn't matter. I don't have anything else to use for it. I probably should have done a better job at getting that All-Be-One down this turn. But that's okay. Big attack. Now our opponents are forced to deal with the board. If not, they're just right in continuing trouble. And we'll go one more turn. Turn 7 here. Play that. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we could play the All-Be-One and the Uncivil Unrest. Or we could get Tari and Mauler in. There's a lot of options here. I think we get the All-Be-One down no matter what. Tari and Mauler would only come in with 1 counter. So I guess we'll just get the Uncivil Unrest down. Remember, they have Trample, so the Uncivil Unrest is going to threaten a lot of damage. And just get into combat, 4 more counters, draw 1 more. Rod is going to make us 4 mana, which we could use for other things. But I think that's kind of not a bad place to stop in the mid-game where we see the deck, the board, gelling together. What do we want to do? Here we're keeping a 4-lander with Annie Joins Up. A spell that says if a triggered ability of a legendary creature you control triggers, it triggers additional time. This is going to double up on Voja's ability. Got Tulsa Mirror. And then Dazzling Theater, giving all of our creature spells Convoke. And then Prop Room, which allows all of our creatures to untap on each other player's untap step, allowing us to keep our creatures up to both attack and block. So not a bad hand. Play the Jetmir's Garden in turn 1. We have a turn 2 play. At least not as it sits, so I think we'll just get, another tap land in. This can come in untap. This is going to come in tap, so we can kind of play it out from here, what we think the best choice is. Turn 3, we draw a Zuri. Okay. Archdruid might not be bad, because it could tap for a couple extra mana next turn. Right, so do that. Turn 4, the Canopy Vista comes in tapped, but I've got 4 mana, so I could do a Zuri, I could do the... I'm next turn off of Tulsa Mirror. Do the Bloodline Pretender. I play what? Is there any way to cheat out multiples? So if I pay 3 for the Pretender, then that's only 2 elves, so I can't do anything. I'm just trying to think if there's any way to, finesse more than 1 out. But I think we'll just get the Pretender out, call Elf for it, and live to fight another day. Now next turn we have Voja down for sure. That 5th land definitely does help. I guess Voja's not attacking this turn, right? Because it doesn't have haste. So maybe we can maneuver multiple out. We have 7. So what? 5 for Tulsa Mirror. Tulsa Mirror comes in and makes Voja friend to elves. Then we can tap Archdruid for a Zuri, right? Sorry, they both come in with a counter because of... Bloodline Pretender gets counter. I apologize. And now we're in good shape. That wolf could have... we're going to gain 3 life of it, but that wolf could attack potentially. Or that wolf could fight somebody if we want. But otherwise, I think we're in a good state now. We've got the mana up for... We're almost, we're at 4 elves. We're almost at 5 elves for Archdruid just to pay for a Zuri. So now it's just about getting Voja down and taking advantage. Let's see, it does have to get green. I haven't made it right. Any way to make a red on a creature? Not at the moment. Because I'm thinking if I go 5 here for Voja, tap for 4 and then 5, I think I could do Prop Room or Theater and Voja. Just trying to think. Overwhelming Stampede, I wouldn't have enough. I could just attack like this, though. Overwhelming Stampede and give her some big damage. I could play the Assault. I also think of something like Annie Joins Up, but there's no way for me to play Annie Joins Up and Voja, I don't think. If I tap this for 4 green, I would need red, white, red, white, red, white, red, white. I actually think I might be able to. So tap this for 4. I think we can get Voja and Annie joins up down this turn. Annie joins up, deals some damage to something for somebody else's turn. If we get the joins up down before Voja, Tolsimir's bottom ability would actually go off twice. But that's okay. Basically now just next turn, right, we'll be able to swing with Voja and get the party started. So going into turn 7, we know that Voja is going to go off twice. So I think this is the turn we would Overwhelming Stampede for what, 5? And then, right, go to combat. These are all getting 1, 2, 3, 4 +1/+1 counters, and we're drawing 2, and that's going to go off twice. So 8 +1/+1 counters, draw twice, and we should be able to spread these out pretty well and deal some big damage to the whole board that way, if not get darn close to winning the game. But let me know, what do you think of Voja down in the comment section below? Again, I don't think the deck's perfect, but I think we're getting down the right track with Voja. There's a lot of fun here to be had with Elves, and I just think that new Tiber, you know, it gets us down the right direction. That plus counter support like Innkeeper's Talent, I think helped this deck a ton and makes us want to keep running down this road, especially in Naya where there's so much great counter support. Let me know what you think of Voja down in the comment section below, and I will catch you guys next time.